For the time being, Simon, another sport that's very close to your heart, and that is boxing. Although you didn't think much of Sunday night, did you? With Jake Paul
I did not, no.
up against Tommy Fury. Conor Benn, we now know, is preparing to launch a legal battle against British boxing for an unexpected £3.5 million quid's worth in damages after he was cleared by the WBC for intentionally doping. This situation has now grown arms and legs. Apparently, Conor Benn, it was put down to him having so many eggs in his system that this threw up the problem. Not threw up, literally, he didn't throw up, but it threw up the problem that he may well have... It's an indication, actually, that we went down the wrong road regards a failed drugs test, as far as he is concerned. And this, he says, vindicates him. But is the whole situation about to descend into more of a mess than it was before? On your well-listened-to podcast...
Yes.
You're the main man from the British Boxing Board of Control, Robert Smith, and you really got into Smith on this very topic.
I hope he can prove he's innocent. Because he's a great talent, he's great for the sport. Forget the name, forget what's coming, his background. But he's a really good boxer and a good
exciting,
fighter.
dynamic fighter.
And we need him.
Yeah,
all the sport needs him, and he attracts people because of his background, etc. But I hope he can prove he can. But at the moment, we haven't seen anything to contradict what I thought.
Have you got the teeth to stop him from fighting in this country? Because I think it's a natural extension of your authority that irrespective if he gets a licence from another commissioning body, that he shouldn't be able to fight on these aisles whilst he hasn't satisfied the criteria that you set for someone to be licensed in this country.
Simon, he will not box on one of our shows in this country until he proves his innocence. To UCAD act on our behalf,
right.
So we take advice from UCAD. The difference between VADA and UCAD is VADA do a test but don't do any discipline.
Do the outcomes, yeah.
UCAD do the disciplinary matters, and we take on board because we've signed up to them, like every other sport in the country. We sign up with them. He will not box here until he's proved there is an explanation.
But Conor Benn is giving an explanation. Conor Benn is saying, I've always been innocent and I've proved my innocence.
Yeah.
The WBC concluded last week that a, quote, highly elevated consumption of eggs was a reasonable explanation for trace samples of clomiphene that showed up in 2 of Benn's VADA samples.
Yeah.
Ben will say, I am innocent. I've been blue in the face telling you I'm innocent, and now legal action is my only route to prove it.
His only route to prove it is to sit in front of the British Boxing Board of Control and to provide them with sufficient evidence to get past the strict liability obligation that he has to be licensed by the British Boxing Board of Control. WBC have no jurisdiction here. They're a sanctioning body. They don't have any licensing authority. If they've chosen to lower the burden of proof to suggest that eggs that he's taken and a diet that he didn't disclose in November of last year when he was asked about his diet, and he talked about his dietary requirements, eggs weren't featured part of it, besides the fact he has an omelette every now and again, weren't featured part of it. And if they want to suggest that that burden of proof, which naturally would have followed through on by saying, OK, where was his egg supplied by, which was the producer, and tracing the trail like the athlete Shelby Houlihan had to do, and she was still banned by the athletic authorities in America because she had the obligation upon her. Strict liability is a very key phrase. The British Boxing Board of Control put out a press statement directly after the WBC allowed Conor to go back into the rankings. And by the way, I think Conor Benn is a lovely young man. I wish he wasn't in this situation. It's the last thing I want for him. I never wanted Conor Benn to make the Eubank fight. I don't want him to be in this situation. I want him to be a superstar because I like him on every level. But this handling of this situation, from the lawyers he's engaged with Mike Morgan, through to the manner in which they've engaged with the British Boxing Board of Control, through to the behaviours of the promoters, with due respect to whoever they are. People think I've got an agenda against Eddie Hearn. I have no agenda against Eddie Hearn. When you've got a promoter turning around and saying the British Boxing Board of Control is a bull whatever. The British Boxing Board of Control.
But if he's such a nice guy as you say he is, and I know he is myself, I've met Conor Benn on many occasions, he's delightful. Do you think the same Conor Benn would go down any drug-taking route? I somehow doubt it. He says, I'm innocent.
Only Conor Benn.
I'm innocent.
Only Conor Benn can answer that question. Only Conor Benn can respond to the allegations that his power has increased dramatically over the last 2 years. Only Conor Benn can answer these. I would hate and like to think that he wasn't. The problem is, when you've got a strict liability obligation upon you, which they have, people have misrepresented this. He did not take a voluntary test. As a result of being inside the top 15 of a WBC, you have to have a VADA test. So it's voluntary from one point of view, but mandatory from another. Otherwise, you don't get ranked. So here we are now. He's gone about it. He's basically suggesting that because his father fell out of favour or fell out of relationships with British Boxing Board of Control, tore his licence up years ago, there was an agenda. I put all of these questions to Robert Smith and said to him, right, what are you going to do? Why did it take you so long? Why did you take 3 months to get some balls? How does it work in your industry? Is it the promoter's top of the tree, then the fighter, then the media, and at the very bottom, the least important people are the governing body? Are you the people that are completely irrelevant? He said, no. I said, how have you got yourself in a situation then when a test is failed? It's a test that's not ultimately under your drug testing agency, UCAD, but notwithstanding it, it's a drug test, and you don't do anything about it. He said, because we got a solicitor's letter, immediately we were notified about that test. And the reasons why we were in a situation not being able to do anything is because we were under legal duress to be able to suppress what we could and couldn't do. I said, what made your decision change then? The second failed test. I said, but you still took 12 days after that. Why did you allow this to develop? And again, the argument comes back, it's because of the legal situation. If you're innocent of something, you don't need to tie people up in legal knots. And what you must be clear about, and again, I must make this point.
If you're innocent of something, you want to prove your innocence.
That's my point.
And that's why they're going down the legal route.
But they haven't proved their innocence. Their case
Simon,
was...
the WBC noted there was no conclusive evidence that Ben engaged in intentional or knowing ingestion of clomiphene.
That's not the burden of obligation for the proof to be licensed by the British Boxing Board of Control. What they've done is they've turned around and they've run a 270-page document based upon the idea that VADA's testing had some challenging. The testing equipment might be oversensitive. It may have been this, that and the other. And they found no grounds on that. They've said VADA is gold standard. There's no difference between laboratories. There's no issues whatsoever. So then comes the second argument, which is the dietary argument that was built up over a period of time. I'm not suggesting that it isn't true. What I'm suggesting is prove it. Don't just say it, prove it. Where does eggs come from? Because clomiphene doesn't feature in eggs in this country. It only features in eggs in America. Was he buying his eggs from America? You should be able to trace those eggs back that he's allegedly taken or supposedly taken, because the governing body, in the same way that Shelby Houlihan, the responsibility is put on her, uses a very specific terminology, strict liability. What's in your body, you have to be able to explain. You have to be able to explain it unequivocally, undeniably. You can't just throw it up in the air and say it was eggs. You've got to be able to prove the trail. This girl in America put private investigators on it to find out the burritos that she ate in a store in America that were infused with nandrolone because they mistakenly put boar's meat into it. And yet still she got a 4-year ban because the obligation was upon her. In the WBC's world, they say, give us what we think is a credible explanation, and okay, eggs, fine. We can't prove he didn't eat eggs, so we'll say that's fine. The British Boxing Board of Control going, no. You've got to do more. And by the way, not only have you got to do more, you've got to come and see us. You can't just say, do one.
You've changed your tune now about the British Boxing Board of Control now that you've had a cosy chat with Robert Smith.
What I said to
they could do nothing right before that.
No, I said to the British Boxing Board of No Control. And that's the first thing I said to Robert Smith when he walked in the studio. Aye, it's the British Boxing Board of No Control. Why don't you do something meaningful that has some teeth? Why are you being pushed around by promoters? Why are you being pushed around by fighters? And Robert Smith's argument was, first of all, it was legal. Second of all, wait and see. Right, because it will come out now. Wait and see.
This is one of the great things, one of the many great things about talkSPORT. We're all in this huge 17th floor of the news building, and everyone in this building listens to our show. And that's why Adi Oladipo, who's been listening outside, has decided to join us. Adi, good afternoon.
Afternoon, gents.
You join us as we're right in the throes of this debate about Conor Benn.
It is a debate, isn't it?
Yeah. What do you want to add to this? Because Ben is still trying to prove his innocence.
Yeah, look, he is. I mean, he is. Obviously, look, we heard recently that he's trying to sue the British Boxing Board of Control for $3.5 million, which is a mistake, but it also could be a case of they haven't got that money. They haven't got that money. Do they want to go down the legal route, or do they want to just shut this thing down by saying, okay, you know what, everyone move on? And I think that's the play here from Conor Benn and his team. With regards to the WBC saying everything's fine, look, a 270-page document was sent to the WBC. Why was 270 pages just to say there's a problem with eggs is an issue for me. And another thing with the WBC, I hate the fact that they're involved in this as well. They're a sanctioning body. They're not a governing body. They're a sanctioning body who should have no play in this whatsoever. I said from the get-go with regards to this Conor Benn situation, it needs to go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport if he wants to clear his name properly. If you want the British public to believe in you, they're not going to believe in you based on what the WBC has to say on this. They're going to believe in you if it goes to a separate entity who have nothing to do with boxing. The WBC, who we know Favour boxers, they do. They have a skin in the game because they take a sanctioning fee. They certainly have skin in the
But
game.
it can only go to the Court of
Shouldn't be the
Arbitration of
ones.
Sport once it's been adjudicated somewhere else. Right? And it hasn't been adjudicated. He's refused to accept that the British Boxing Board of control of any jurisdiction. I'd rather tear my licence up than exhibit any degree of accounting to you guys and proving my innocence. Because the WBC are the sanctioning body, he can't go to the Court of Arbitration of Sport because no one's given him any sanctions at this moment in time. He's refused to be party to it. So if he goes to the British Boxing Board of Control and they turn around and say, throwing the book at you, and the key terminology in the British Boxing Board of Control's press statement was strict liability. That was so different from the WBC. Strict liability means it's in your body. You've got to tell me precisely, concisely, and prove how it got in there.
Yeah, but I think one thing we're doing, and look, Simon spoke with Robert Smith, but one thing we are doing, General Secretary, obviously, of the British Boxing Board of Control, is almost removing any liability or fault from the British Boxing Board of Control. They knew about this situation, and were they going to say anything? Absolutely no, until it got leaked. They weren't going to say anything, were they? Until someone from the press leaked this thing, the British Boxing Board of Control were going to go ahead and sanction this fight.
They deny that, and they deny that emphatically. Because I said to him, "How comes on July the 23rd? We didn't know about it until August the 30th. Okay, what happened between July 23rd and August the 30th? We got a cease and desist from Conor Benn's lawyers. We got told get back. I said, how can you get told as the British Boxing Board of Control get back in your box? You are the box, right? So, what happens on August? So then why did you decide to change your mind in October? Because of the second test. But you got the second test on September the 23rd. So why did you wait until October the 4th when it was about to be leaked?
Addy,
no, we'd already made that decision.
We're running over. We're going to head to the 12:30 bulletin shortly, but I'll ask you this. You're out there, mate, all the time. I know you mix with the boxing public all the time. You mix with other fighters. What is the thought out there? Ben, innocent or guilty?
Look, I mean, if you go on what boxers are saying, and you look at Anthony Fowler and Sonny Edwards, two sort of very vocal fighters in the game, two active fighters, they think guilty.
Sonny Edwards,
they think guilty. They think it's been handled wrongly. They don't believe the I don't want to say the excuse, but the reasoning as to why this clomiphene was in the body. Look, Conor Benn's been adamant that he is innocent. He wants to fight. He will fight again. It will probably be in the Middle East, but the majority of boxers believe he is guilty.
Do you think we'll see him fight here again?
No, especially if he's going down the legal route of wanting to sue the British Boxing Board of Control.
Both of you do not think he'll fight on these shores
again? The British
again?
Boxing Board of Control, irrespective of the £3.5 million lawsuit, will be insured for it. So there's no fear. If he wants to launch a £3.5 million lawsuit against the British Boxing Board of Control, fill your boots, son. Away you go, see what they do. And then we'll see if the British Boxing... I think the biggest thing they're weak of is they've got no teeth.
Simon, do you think he's guilty?
I think he's got to do more than what he's done. I think he's using very crafty, clever lawyers that are better than the lawyers that WBC have got, better than the lawyers that UKAD have got. And I think what they're doing is they're getting them off on a technicality. And the technicality is in a 270-page document that did not reference eggs. It was about VADA. It was about VADA and their processes and the temperamentality of the equipment in VADA laboratories. That's what it was about.
Ben still says he's innocent, and
I
time will tell.
think he could be.
Okay.